The low hum of conversation and clinking glasses filled the VIP lounge. A space designed for comfort, exclusivity, and quiet luxury. Big Shaq sat in a sleek leather chair near the panoramic window, scrolling through his phone, waiting for his boarding call. The atmosphere was calm, until it wasn't. A flight attendant, dressed in crisp navy blue, approached with a polished yet uneasy smile. "Excuse me, sir," she began, her tone carefully measured. "We have a bit of a seating issue. We're going to need you to switch seats." Shaq barely looked up. "Nah, I'm good," he said, still scrolling. The attendant hesitated. "It's actually a special request. We have a passenger who—" Shaq put his phone down, turning his full attention to her. "Who what?" A flicker of discomfort passed over her face. "A VIP guest is boarding, and they require your seat." The words settled in the air, heavy and deliberate. Shaq leaned back. "So, I'm not a VIP?" The attendant straightened. "Of course, sir. But this guest has a particular preference, and we were hoping you'd understand." Silence. Other passengers subtly glanced over, pretending not to eavesdrop. Some whispered. A businessman in the corner smirked, pretending to be busy on his laptop. Shaq folded his arms. "What preference exactly?" The attendant's professional mask faltered. "We were asked to accommodate them." His eyes narrowed. "Let me get this straight. I paid for this seat. I checked in. I got here early. And now I need to move because someone else just walked in." Her voice dipped lower. "Sir, it's not personal." "But it is, though," he countered. "Who is it?" The hesitation stretched too long. That's when Shaq knew. A man in a tailored gray suit stood near the entrance, a rolling carry-on beside him. White. Mid-50s. Confidence dripping off him like cologne. He wasn't waiting for an answer. He was waiting for the seat. Shaq exhaled slowly. "You telling me this guy?" He nodded toward the man. "Walked in here, saw me, and decided his experience would be better if I wasn't here." The attendant's gaze flickered toward the manager at the front desk. A silent request for backup. Shaq smirked, shaking his head. "Wow." Another flight staffer approached, a man this time, older, with a neatly clipped beard. "Sir, we understand your concern, but we need your cooperation. This is a matter of protocol." Shaq chuckled. "Whose protocol?" The suit at the entrance checked his watch, unimpressed with the delay. "You know what?" Shaq clapped his hands together. "I got a question. Just one." The staff braced themselves. "If I was a white guy sitting here, would we be having this conversation?" The older staffer's mouth opened, then shut. A slow, painful beat of silence passed. Shaq nodded. "Thought so." The businessman in the corner stopped typing. A woman with sunglasses perched on her head reached for her phone, recording under the table. The manager finally stepped in, a woman with a name tag and a forced smile. "Mr. Shaq, we sincerely apologize for any misunderstanding. It's just that Mr. Wentworth," she gestured to the suited man, "is a valued customer, and we do our best to accommodate special requests." Shaq's face remained unreadable. "I'm a valued customer too. Or do I not count?" The woman hesitated, shifting on her heels. "It's not about that. So tell me what it is about," he pressed. "Explain it to me like I'm 5. The tension was a living thing now, thick and pressing. The suited man, Mr. Wentworth, sighed audibly, annoyed. "Is there an issue here?" he called out, as if he were the victim. Shaq looked over at him. "Yeah, there is. Apparently my seat offends you." Wentworth scoffed. "I made a simple request. I wasn't aware it would cause complications." Shaq laughed, a low, humorless sound. "Complications. That's a good word." A young employee at the front desk whispered something into the manager's ear. She nodded slightly, then turned back to Shaq, her voice measured. "Mr. Shaq, we're simply trying to avoid an unnecessary escalation." His eyes flashed. "Nah. You already escalated it when you assumed I'd be the one to move." When you assumed I'd just nod and take the hit. The businessman in the corner cleared his throat, uncomfortable. A mother holding her toddler shifted in her chair. The camera on the woman's phone remained steady, capturing everything. Shaq checked his watch, then exhaled. All right. Relief flickered over the manager's face. We truly appreciate your... Shaq pulled out his phone. Tension spiked. The staff waited. The other passengers waited. Mr. Wentworth tilted his head, curious. Shaq hit a single contact and lifted the phone to his ear. Yo, he said into the receiver, his voice calm, steady. I need you to do something for me. Yeah. Right now. He leaned back, eyes on the staff, letting the weight of his words settle. Yeah, he continued. I need names. Everyone involved. I want receipts. Policy statements. Past incidents, if they exist. And I need it public by the time I land. The flight attendant's face paled. The manager's lips parted slightly, panic creeping into her carefully curated expression. Shaq leaned forward slightly. Oh. And tell them one more thing. He locked eyes with the manager. Tell them to clear out their desks. Within minutes, the tension inside the lounge spills onto the internet. A short clip, shaky but clear, captures everything: the request, the hesitation, the moment Shaq makes the call. The caption is simple. They really tried to move Big Shaq for a white passenger. Watch what happens next. The video spreads like wildfire. Twitter catches it first, then Instagram, then TikTok. Comments flood in, dissecting every second. They thought he wouldn't say anything. Wrong. Imagine what happens to people who don't have Shaq's influence. This isn't a misunderstanding. It's a pattern. Within the hour, the airline's social media team scrambles to respond. Their first statement is cautious, distant. We are aware of an incident involving one of our valued passengers. We take all concerns seriously and are looking into the matter. It's a mistake. The internet sees right through it. The quote tweets come fast, brutal. Translation: We're hoping this blows over by morning. Looking into it? We just watched it happen in 4K. Hashtags form. Hashtag Do Better Airlines. Hashtag Shaq didn't move. Hashtag Flying While Black. Asterisk asterisk the pressure mounts. Then the journalists step in. An investigative reporter pulls records. The airline's history isn't spotless. In the past 3 years alone, there have been multiple discrimination complaints, quiet settlements, deleted bad press. A lawsuit still pending from a black couple denied first-class upgrades despite open seats. And now, a new name added to the list: Big Shaq. Back at headquarters, executives are panicking. Calls are coming in from investors, stakeholders, board members. Damage control mode. The PR team drafts another statement, this one more urgent. We sincerely apologize for any misunderstanding regarding Mr. Shaq's experience. We do not tolerate discrimination in any form and are reviewing our policies. It backfires. The word misunderstanding is all people see. It fuels the fire. Screenshots of the statement circulate with captions. The classic corporate non-apology. They're not sorry they did it. They're sorry we saw it. Shaq, meanwhile, says nothing. No tweets, no interviews. Just silence. Some take it as restraint. Others see it as strategy. The silence makes the airline nervous. They expect a fiery response, a press conference, an open letter. Instead, Shaq lets the internet do the work. And it does. The viral video reaches 1 million views. Then 5. Then 10. More people share their stories. Former employees come forward. Anonymous threads expose internal policies, the unspoken rules favoring certain travelers over others. Then the real blow lands. A former flight attendant, no longer under NDA, gives an interview. She confirms what everyone suspected. The practice of guest prioritization isn't random. It's a quiet, unwritten rule, one that has consistently benefited wealthier white passengers. The airline denies it. The internet doesn't believe them. As pressure mounts, sponsors start pulling out. travel influencers distance themselves. A celebrity brand ambassador ends their partnership. The airline's stock dips. Still, Shaq says nothing. People are waiting for him to speak, to call for boycotts, to go live and air his grievances. He doesn't. Instead, he watches. He waits. ***. Because he knows something the airline doesn't. This isn't just a bad PR cycle. This is the beginning of their reckoning. The media storm intensifies. What started as a viral video spirals into a full-scale investigation. A journalist, already covering corporate discrimination cases, takes interest. She digs deep, sifting through old reports, lawsuits, and buried complaints. The findings are damning. For years, the airline has faced multiple allegations of racial bias. Some were settled quietly. Others never made it past legal threats. Passengers of color consistently reported denied upgrades, unnecessary security checks, and mysterious seat reassignments. Employees brought concerns to management, only to be ignored or dismissed. The journalist's article drops with a headline that hits like a hammer. Not just a misunderstanding, the systemic discrimination behind one airline's VIP policies. The piece lays it all out: documents, testimonies, leaked emails. Screenshots from ex-staff members expose priority preferences for wealthier, white passengers. An internal memo from a senior executive surfaces, referring to VIP seating as a space where the right clientele should feel comfortable. The internet erupts again, this time with anger sharpened into action. Whistleblowers come forward. A former flight attendant confirms the memo's authenticity. Another recounts being instructed to politely persuade certain passengers to move for VIPs. A black pilot shares his own experience of being mistaken for a baggage handler, twice, by his own airline. Protests begin. Crowds gather outside the airline's headquarters, demanding accountability. Signs wave in the air, ***. We're not moving diversity, not discrimination, change the policy, not the seat. Celebrities add fuel to the fire. Actors, athletes, musicians, some who've flown with the airline, ***, speak out, ***, A-list names call for investigations. High-profile lawyers offer free legal representation for past victims. Activists organize boycotts, urging travelers to choose competitors. The airline's response is frantic. Another statement, longer this time, but still missing the mark. We acknowledge concerns raised by the public and are committed to reviewing our internal procedures to ensure fairness for all passengers. Too late. The damage is done. And still, Shaq stays quiet. No interviews. No social media rants. Just silence. Then, when the tension is at its peak, he breaks it. A single statement. Simple. Measured. Devastating. This isn't just about me. It's about justice. The words ripple across every platform, cutting through corporate spin and PR damage control. Because this isn't just a scandal anymore. It's a movement. The pressure reaches a breaking point. The airline's board of directors convenes in an emergency meeting, but the writing is already on the wall. Stock values have plunged, partners are distancing themselves, and the boycott movement is costing millions by the day. There's no salvaging this, not without drastic action. The first heads to roll are at the top. The CEO, once confident in brushing off the controversy, resigns under mutual agreement. His statement is carefully worded, emphasizing his commitment to fairness, while conveniently ignoring the years of ignored complaints. The public isn't fooled. One by one, the airline's senior leadership follows. The head of customer relations, the VP of operations, the chief diversity officer, gone. The airline hopes this will be enough. It isn't. The damage is too deep, and now, investors are stepping in. They've seen scandals before, but nothing on this scale. The backlash isn't just online, it's affecting real financial stability. Shareholders demand an immediate restructuring. For the first time in the company's history, diversity policies aren't just a talking point for PR, they're a requirement. The changes come swiftly. New hiring policies, sensitivity training, an independent audit of the company's practices. Travel associations begin re-examining industry-wide discrimination patterns, forcing other airlines to acknowledge their own shortcomings before they're next in the crosshairs. But the movement doesn't stop at the corporate level. Government officials, under immense public pressure, step into the fight. Lawmakers who had once ignored similar complaints suddenly become vocal about the issue. A congressional hearing is scheduled. Airline executives are subpoenaed. A senator proposes a new anti-discrimination travel bill, one that would require transparency in seating policies, stricter penalties for racial bias, and oversight committees to ensure fair treatment for all passengers. Airline lobbyists push back, but the movement has too much momentum. With sponsors, celebrities, and activists backing the cause, ignoring it is no longer an option. Through it all, Shaq remains focused. While the world watches the airline crumble, he doesn't gloat. There's no victory lap. Instead, he redirects the conversation. "This isn't about one company," he says in a rare public statement. "This is about making sure this doesn't happen to anyone else." He partners with civil rights organizations, travel advocacy groups, and lawmakers to ensure the change is real, not just a temporary PR stunt. Because for Shaq, this was never about a seat. It was about dismantling a system that should have never existed in the first place. The dust settles, but the fallout isn't over. The public is divided. For every person who celebrates the airline's downfall, there's someone who thinks the punishment doesn't fit the crime. The controversy has sparked a fierce debate. Was this an overreaction? Should the airline be punished this severely for what's seen as a few bad decisions made by a few bad actors? On one side, activists, public figures, and everyday passengers rally for accountability. They're not just happy with corporate resignations. They want to see the airline, and the industry as a whole, change for good. They're tired of being silenced, tired of being misunderstood, tired of watching wealthy, powerful people continue to profit from an unjust system. On the other side, there are those who believe the reaction is excessive. They argue that the airline's years of success shouldn't be overshadowed by one incident. This wasn't a systemic issue, some say. It was just an isolated misunderstanding. Others argue the airline's reputation has been unfairly tarnished by social media outrage and cancel culture. The public debate rages on. But as the controversy unfolds, the former CEO, who had once stepped down quietly, breaks his silence. In a high-profile exclusive interview, he lays out his defense. "I'll admit," he begins, "there were issues within the company, but they weren't systemic. It wasn't the airline's fault. We had bad actors in key positions, and they took advantage of a flawed protocol. The system wasn't perfect, but this wasn't as bad as it seems." He continues to blame unnamed subordinates, insisting that the company was blindsided by the fallout and had no idea the problem was as deep-rooted as it was. He even goes so far as to downplay the systemic racism accusations, focusing instead on his legacy of positive corporate growth. The public isn't having it. Shaq, who had stayed quiet for weeks, finally responds, not with the anger many expect, but with measured, strategic precision. His statement surprises everyone. "I don't need revenge," Shaq says. "I don't need to see people lose their jobs. What I need is change. Real change." He doesn't engage with the former CEO's comments, choosing instead to focus on what comes next. "We need long-term solutions," he adds. "I'm not fighting for one victory, I'm fighting for everyone who's ever been overlooked. We need to start thinking differently about how we treat each other, especially when money and power are involved." It's a turning point. Shaq's focus on redemption instead of retribution turns the conversation toward healing. Instead of gloating, he uses his platform to encourage dialogue and advocate for meaningful change that will outlast the scandal. The airline, sensing the cultural shift and the mounting pressure, makes a bold move. The board announces an ambitious new initiative, a full-scale diversity overhaul They commit to restructuring their leadership, implementing anti-racism training for all employees, and enacting new, transparent policies on passenger treatment. The plan is comprehensive. They promise to increase the number of diverse candidates in top management, establish a public feedback mechanism for complaints, and ensure accountability at all levels. It's the first step in repairing the company's reputation and trying to regain the trust of the public. But while the announcement is met with cautious optimism, Shaq isn't done. He's careful not to celebrate the airline's intentions prematurely. Instead, he keeps the pressure on. "This is just the start," he says. "We can't let them off the hook. We need to make sure the changes happen. It's not enough to just say the right things, we need action. We need follow-through." And Shaq is right. The real test will be in the months and years to come, whether the airline can turn its promises into action and whether the cultural shift they're touting will actually take hold. But something is different now. The conversation has shifted. It's no longer just about one company or one incident. The ripple effect is real, and the call for accountability and inclusivity will continue to echo through the industry. What started as a viral moment has sparked something much bigger, a shift in how people view power, privilege, and responsibility. And Shaq? He's not just the hero of the story, he's the catalyst for change. The ripple effect is undeniable. What began as a single confrontation has turned into a full-scale movement, and it's quickly gaining momentum across the entire airline industry. Other companies take notice. Some make small changes, updating customer service protocols or pledging to do better. But others, more ambitious, go further. Airlines begin to roll out new diversity and inclusion initiatives, influenced directly by the public outcry. They establish bias training for all staff members, from flight attendants to pilots, and openly commit to a zero-tolerance policy toward discrimination. These policies are quickly matched with transparency measures, requiring annual reports on how well companies are meeting their diversity targets. It's a new era in air travel, one where accountability isn't just a buzzword, it's being embedded into the culture of the industry. But it's not just the airlines that are impacted. The movement touches down in more places than expected. Minority-owned businesses suddenly have the chance to tap into new travel opportunities. Airlines begin to prioritize smaller, diverse suppliers, from catering companies to airport retailers. Communities once excluded from these networks find themselves gaining access to new economic opportunities that were previously beyond reach. It's not just about policy changes in the boardrooms, it's a cultural shift that reverberates throughout society. More people are finding their voices, and more businesses are creating spaces where inclusion is not just encouraged but actively supported. Shaq, always at the forefront of the change, becomes a key figure in this movement. His legacy grows beyond the fight for justice in the airline industry. He sees this moment as an opportunity to create long-lasting impact, especially in fields where underrepresented groups have been historically excluded. Instead of celebrating the victory, Shaq shifts his focus to the future, specifically to the next generation, He partners with organizations dedicated to empowering underprivileged youth, providing scholarships and mentorship programs to help young people enter aviation careers. He funds training programs for those who might not have access to the resources needed to become pilots, flight attendants, or aviation engineers. This is the heart of Shaq's vision. It's not about fixing one airline, it's about ensuring that future generations are prepared to take the reins and continue the fight for equality. He sees the aviation industry as a powerful tool for change, and he's determined to create a pipeline of talent that reflects the true diversity of the country. But not everyone is thrilled with this transformation. As with any significant shift, there's a backlash, particularly from groups who feel threatened by the changes. Some see it as an attack on tradition, as if the movement is erasing the systems that have always worked for them. These groups resist the change with increasing vocality. They argue that policies prioritizing diversity could lower standards or exclude talented individuals simply because of their race or background. They accuse those pushing for inclusion of focusing on identity politics instead of meritocracy. The criticism grows louder. Op-eds and interviews appear, questioning whether diversity initiatives are making the airline industry, or any industry, better or just more politically correct. Some even argue that these changes amount to reverse discrimination. For Shaq, the challenge is clear. He can't let the resistance pull him away from the core of the movement. He understands that progress has always been met with opposition, but that doesn't mean it should stop. "You can't change everyone's mind," he responds in an interview. "But that doesn't mean you don't change the system. We're not doing this to take away from anyone, we're doing it to make sure everyone has a seat at the table. And we're not going to stop until we get there." He knows the road ahead won't be easy, but his resolve only strengthens. He takes it as a challenge to make sure the shift isn't just a momentary blip, it has to be permanent, deeply ingrained in how people think and how businesses operate. For Shaq, the real battle isn't about winning against the critics. It's about ensuring that the next generation doesn't have to fight the same battles over again. As the movement gains ground, the pushback intensifies. Critics, many of whom are deeply entrenched in traditional business practices, begin to organize. Business moguls who have always prided themselves on their success under the old system take to the media, denouncing the changes as an unnecessary overcorrection. They argue that the shift toward diversity and inclusion will only dilute quality and lower standards in the industry. Conservative media outlets fuel the fire, framing the movement as a liberal agenda, bent on dismantling meritocracy. They claim that the demand for racial equity in business practices has reached absurd levels, with some going as far as to call it reverse discrimination. The narrative they push is clear: diversity shouldn't come at the expense of talent. Investors who had once championed the airline's commitment to exclusivity and luxury now question the financial wisdom of embracing what they perceive as a risky shift in priorities. They fear that the company's new stance on inclusion will alienate their affluent, predominantly white clientele. "If it's not broken, why fix it?" becomes their rallying cry. This resistance, though expected, is no less intense. In the face of mounting opposition, Shaq doesn't retreat. If anything, he becomes even more visible, his voice stronger, more authoritative. A live debate is set between Shaq and one of the fiercest critics of the new policies, a well-known CEO of a major corporation. The debate is meant to settle the issue: is the demand for diversity really about progress, or is it an overblown trend? The debate is fiery, the stakes are high. The CEO begins with a familiar argument, emphasizing that diversity initiatives, while well-intentioned, undermine merit and create division. He claims that businesses should focus solely on results and profitability, and that the emphasis on equality is a distraction. Shaq listens patiently, letting the CEO voice his concerns before calmly and methodically dismantling the argument. He doesn't shout or get emotional. He simply states the facts. "You're telling me that diversity takes away from success, but history shows us something different. Diversity leads to stronger teams, better ideas, and more profitable companies. Look at any major corporation that has embraced inclusivity. Their bottom lines aren't just surviving, they're thriving." He pauses, allowing the CEO's words to linger in the air. Then he hits them with undeniable clarity. "But let's talk about the moral side of this. You can't measure integrity with spreadsheets. You can't account for the lives and opportunities you're shutting out by clinging to a system that favors one group over others. The right thing to do isn't always the easiest thing to do, but it's the right thing." The crowd responds, their applause echoing in the auditorium. The CEO falters. His polished arguments begin to unravel under the weight of Shaq's simple yet unassailable truth. There are no slick retorts, no dismissive remarks, just a man who knows the right side of history and isn't afraid to speak it. Shaq doesn't engage in petty banter or make personal attacks. He sticks to the core of the issue. Inclusion is about strength, not weakness. It's about creating equitable systems where no one is left out, where everyone has the opportunity to thrive. And that, Shaq argues, isn't just good for business, it's essential for a fair and just society. When the debate ends, there's no question who won. Shaq's position resonates far beyond the stage. His words carry the weight of truth and morality, and the momentum behind the movement grows even stronger. Despite the backlash, the airline's leadership remains steadfast. The pressure from investors and critics grows more intense, but the airline refuses to back down. The CEO may be gone, but the new management team understands that their only path forward is one of change and accountability. In a symbolic gesture that resonates far beyond the boardroom, the airline announces that the very seat Shaq had been asked to vacate, the seat that was at the center of the entire controversy, will now be permanently dedicated to diversity awareness. The seat, once a symbol of exclusion, becomes a beacon for inclusion. It's more than just a publicity stunt, it's a message to the world that the company is committed to embracing the values Shaq fought for. It's not just about changing one airline's policies. It's about sending a clear signal that resilience in the face of adversity can lead to transformation. The airline, once a bastion of privilege and discrimination, is now an example of what can happen when leadership refuses to accept the status quo and chooses instead to move forward with empathy and inclusion. For Shaq, the journey is far from over. The critics may still be out there, but their influence is waning. The movement is bigger than any one person, and its impact is undeniable. With each passing day, the world moves closer to a reality where equity isn't just an ideal, it's a practiced truth. And that truth, Shaq knows, is what will carry the day.